1,000 anecdotes are not as powerful as one idea being tested in the real world.
Welcome to The Visionaries. I'm your host, Nikki Greenberg. Today, I'm excited to introduce Tim Papandreou, CEO of ETA Advisory, Forbes writer, and an advisor to Google X. Tim has played a pivotal role in some of the most ambitious projects, including helping bring autonomous cars to our roads as part of the Google Waymo team. With a background spanning from urban planning to leading innovation challenges at Google, Tim is an expert in transforming bold ideas into practical solutions. In this episode, Tim will take us inside Google X's renowned Moonshot process, showing how audacious goals can become reality. He'll share a strategic approach that helps him turn visions like autonomous vehicles into commercial success and how these lessons can apply to any industry. Get ready to learn from one of the brightest minds in innovation and discover how you too can turn your big idea into real-world impact. Tim, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Nikki, it's such a pleasure to be here. I always love your introductions. I'm like, is this really me she's talking about? And I'm like, oh, this person sounds great. I'm like, oh, she's talking about me.
You know what? I had to edit it down. There was so much in there. We could spend the entire 45 minutes just talking about how fabulous you are, which is usually what we do when we get together. But yeah. Tim, today, rather than talk about how fabulous you are, because that's just going to come through, I want to talk about what you do and how you do it. So for everyone's pleasure, can you tell me, what's the bold project that we're discussing today and how's it different?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think you're fabulous and I love everything that you do and work on. So it means a lot deep down to hear that kind of mutual respect and adoration from your side. But so my work has been, the last 20 years, I've been working on really figuring out ways that we can build really big, audacious projects and programs that are really multi-sectoral, cross-functional, and just hard. They're really, really hard things. And but they need to be done because our world is getting more complex. It's getting more complicated. We understand the concept like, VUCA, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity. All of that's starting to make our projects and programs that much harder to do, whether it's a large infrastructure project, whether it's a massive software change. We've seen huge examples of when they just don't go right, when they go massively wrong, to rolling out a consumer product that just wasn't ready for the market. And I've been in the middle of all of these and have a lot of lessons learned. I would say less bruises and more lessons learned than war wounds, but definitely got my fair share of cuts and jabs along the way. And really the lesson that I've learned from all of this is that if you don't actually begin the question of why are we doing this? What are we trying to solve? What's the purpose of this? You're never going to get to the how and you're not going to be able to do it properly as well. And in the world of moonshots, just to explain to the audience what a moonshot is basically a wild, audacious idea that requires really a different way of thinking, a systems thinking mindset. It's beyond linear. It's not this plus this, it's that. It's really like, okay, if we do these multiple things at the same time, we're moving this over here, we're filling this information here, we're getting this signal over here. And you have to try and orchestrate that. It's kind of like a conductor where you're conducting a symphony. You've got to be able to understand all the different instruments and then have a timing as well, because it can seriously go wrong. And you've seen orchestras when they're warming up, it's like, it's hurting my ears. And then when they're playing, it's just like, wow, this is almost transforms you, right? So it's the same thing with Moonshot projects. It's a global problem. It's not a software update. This is like, does this affect billions of people with radical breakthrough technology that hasn't really been tried before? And the third piece, which is the hardest, has to be commercially viable. This thing has to actually get traction and market share. Otherwise, it's a science project, which is great, but it's not what moonshots are about. And in the world of moonshots, we try and basically look at a bunch of core principles to really help anybody understand this. And this is what I do with my work, whether it's helping large construction firms or, huge technology companies or infrastructure companies or banks, etc. It's starting off with what are we trying to solve? First of all, what is this thing and how does technology actually help us get there? The second thing is looking at, has this been done before, and what can we learn from what's done before? Can we add to the process rather than reinvent the wheel kind of thing? Then we have to look at things like, we have to work on the hardest part first. It's so easy for leaders and teams to say, well, let's just do the small stuff. But the small stuff never gets the big issue, which is the thing that needs to be cracked, right? So work on the hardest part first. And you'll find that once you crack that big piece, everything else becomes much more easier to see. But that's really hard to sustain the momentum. You really need to try things and iterate on the fly, which means version 1.0 is just crap. And it's okay because 1,000 anecdotes are not as powerful as one idea being tested in the real world, right? So it's much more powerful to test that one idea in the real world and try and iterate over time. You have to bring in diverse perspectives, not just diversity from the way that we physically look and how we've been educated, but our ideas, the way we think, etc. We've brought in people from the fashion industry and the telecommunications industry together to figure out new ways of thinking. Like, we really think of different diversity perspectives. And you really need to think about ways that you can bring it out to the market quickly, but in a controlled environment. Like, if you are a large corporation, don't bring this new idea out to your customers. That's a recipe for disaster we've seen many times, even with AI right now. Bring it out to a very specific control group that can iterate and test on the fly, and then test it in bite-sized pieces to your larger audience for feedback. And that way you get a really good way of developing synergy. And then iterate, which is basically think really big, go really big, but start off really, really small, iterate until it's okay, and then bring it in and fold it into your overall operations. And that's basically the essence of a moonshot. Super easy to say, simple, but simple is not easy, right? It's super complex, but it's not complicated. It's just complex. And that's really the gist of the whole moonshot thinking.
I love that, Tim. And I think if people only listen in for 5 minutes, they've already got their hours worth over a cup of coffee. And I know how much you love your coffee. So what I love is this description of the process. It's understanding that, yes, when you have a bold idea, it is complex. Don't shy away from actually getting to the core of it and solving that hard thing, because a lot of people like to have those little bits and pieces and go, oh yeah, I can tick things off my list, or we've tried this. That's peripheral. That's peripheral. You've got to get to the core of what it is. That's going to be that biggest obstacle, because if you can't get past that obstacle, it's not going to come to life. So, for example, it's like, as I said in your introduction, with you being part of that team that brought Waymo onto the roads, bringing autonomous cars onto the roads. I know that you come from a policy background and urban planning background. As I said, everyone, look Tim up, go onto his website, go onto his YouTube, go onto his social media, go onto his LinkedIn, look at his bio, which is that long, sink your teeth in, because when Tim's describing this diversity of viewpoint, he also embodies it, being multidisciplinary. So let me kind of bring this back a bit. So is there something you can talk to? Can you talk to that, cracking that nut of bringing autonomous cars to the road, and how you kind of were part of that team that balanced this huge vision, but also the practicality of going, well, now there's legislation, there's city officials, there's safety, there's people, there's cars, there's ambiguity, and you've got to get this right. Like, how do you get across this? Like, how do you take this idea from fantasy to reality, and how do you overcome opposition to something that's new and novel?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a big, big question, right? So this is the whole purpose of the moonshot. Waymo was one of the big moonshots that we call graduated, right? So basically made it through the moonshot factory process, because the moonshot factory process is also making sure that it hits those 3 points: global problem to solve, breakthrough technology, but is commercially viable. And many projects don't make it outside of the factory. They get recycled, and we call it the data compost pile, and we learn and create something new from that. But Waymo made it all the way through because it was a global problem. 1.25 million people are killed every year in car crashes. And most of it is because people are either going way too fast, the roads are poorly designed, we just don't have the ability to look out 360. We're on our phones. We're looking at these new infotainments in these vehicles. All these things are basically converging. People are looking at their smartphones now. Are they really even driving anymore? They're just listening to directions from Google Maps, right? So there's all of these things that are happening in the background, which are moral and ethical dilemmas. And then we have this issue of vehicles and transport are the fastest growing energy consuming sector of our economy, the greatest amount of pollution. There's 10 days a year that people are stuck in traffic. That's more days than most Americans get on holidays, vacation. So there's all of these multi-sectoral issues. And then almost 20% of adults, working adults, cannot get a full-time job because they can't drive a car. And so they're being forced into part-time jobs or other jobs. So there's an economic opportunity issue as well. And there's traffic safety. People, because the way they look, get arrested more often than not. People can't get taxes because they look different way or they have a different background. And so all of these discriminatory practices, and we're saying, okay, can AV technology, autonomous vehicle, can we solve all of that all at once? And it's like, can we do everything everywhere all at once? And the answer is no. But what you can do is we can try out the safety piece, having computer technology that has got LiDAR, cameras, radar, etc., means that it can see 360 degrees in full view. It can see up to 500 meters ahead. So there is that opportunity to slow down, to make a decision before we even think about it as humans, but then to calibrate all that in a system. And can we have the system to work smarter and to behave in a more orderly way? Autonomous vehicles, for example, don't break the law. They don't speed. They don't tailgate. They don't get road rage. They don't drive drunk or under the influence of drugs. Like all these things that we could just on its own would be a huge, huge benefit to society. But then there's the other side as well. A huge portion of our population, our grandparents, can't drive or shouldn't be driving anymore, but they still need mobility because social inclusion is a really valuable asset for our economy and our society. And people are being more and more excluded because they can't drive anymore. And so they're basically aging and getting more frail. So getting to medical appointments, etc., those are opportunities that we saw where we could actually tie that as well. So there's all of these societal benefits that we could tie together, but we had to try it out first, and we had to choose a neighborhood, choose a vehicle type, and then choose a demographic that we could actually work with. And a lot of people say, "Oh, Tim, why did you guys choose Phoenix, Arizona? Boring, right? Why didn't you choose New York or San Francisco where the demand is?" Because that was also where there was a lot of complexity, where the computer technology wasn't going to be as reliable as it could. Because remember, my company is called ETA, but the whole point of transport is estimated time of arrival. Without that reliability of beating or even meeting what Uber does right now, there's no way this would work. So in Phoenix, what was interesting was that Phoenix is a hot place, really good to test our senses. It's a fairly flat place, and it's a fairly the fastest growing community in the US. It's also a very small ride-hailing market, but a very large car ownership market with multiple cars per family household. And we thought, well, there's a hard nut to crack. What if we could get people who are used to driving their own cars, who don't like waiting in the heat, etc.? Could we get them into the system? And again, we've solved a lot of big problems by trying it out there. And now we have San Francisco. We have other places that they're rolling out to. I should say they. I'm no longer part of the company, but we're always part of the company because we're so excited to see what they're doing. But they've proven that things are safer. They've proven that they can get the ETAs to the level that meet Uber, and they're getting people in ways that are creating more opportunity. A lot of people you see on social media when they're talking about their first Waymo ride, they feel like it's magic, right? It's like this magic opportunity because there's no one at the steering wheel.
I think you got that from my social media, Tim.
Yeah. So you just loved it, right? Yeah, exactly. So,
I said it's like driving with a ghost.
Yeah, it's just like this my magic carpet ride, right? It's like, and then what's funny is 30 seconds later, it just goes to their phone. Like it becomes normal. And so that's what brings the Moonshot to life is making the extraordinary ordinary and that people can use it. And they're starting to say how much they're really enjoying it, but it also has some synergies. People are seeing it and taking it to longer rides on public transport. It's picking them up and dropping them off. So it's doing a lot of the things that we want to do that we would do on their own. And the question is now, will people forego their second or third car in their household? Will it actually free up real estate, for example, where half of our real estate is tied to parking? And if we free up parking, then all of a sudden now we can build more on our existing sites and improve the sustainability of our cities. We can reduce the carbon footprint of our transport system. We can reduce the crashes. Less people getting hit by cars means more people being healthier, less impact on our healthcare system. You see all these flow-on effects just keep adding and adding and adding just from that idea of the very beginning of what would it be like if we could have self-driving vehicles? Could computers actually do the work for us? And from that question, seeded that DARPA challenge, that federal government challenge, and that's what led to this today. And now Waymo is operating in a couple of cities, and their plans to operate in many, many more. And that societal shift is gradual. A lot of people complain, oh, it's taking too long, but that deliberate, slow, and steady is what's been really the ability for them to actually make those massive changes moving forward. And now they're just going to be looking at applying it to other opportunities, because it's a technology that moves anything on wheels, right? It doesn't need to be a car, or it can be a bus, it can be a truck, it can be a garbage truck, it can be anything. So this could be agricultural machinery. Like, we're seeing this now happen in multiple markets worldwide. And so even in mining in Australia. So it's a really interesting opportunity to see this happen.
So Tim, I love how you describe it all, because it sounds like, if I can break it down, you start with one challenge, one simple idea. What can autonomous vehicles mean? That's it. You pick a test market and you understand the conditions, pros and cons. So in this case, Phoenix, Arizona. It's flat, great. Lots of roads, great. Challenges being changing habits of people. So it sounds like you already broken down, like, what are the challenges and opportunities? So you know what you're working through. And then methodically, just through testing, iterating, you're starting to get a clearer picture coming together. So even though it's this big, ambitious idea, it's actually simplified down and then broken down into its different components. And from there on, changing habits, full domination, et cetera, et cetera.
It just happens.
Yeah, well, that's it. And, when I was in Phoenix a few months ago, I saw the Waymo cars at the airport. I'm like, well, I've definitely got to try one of these out. So when I had my return trip to the airport, I booked the Waymo, and I'd driven in an autonomous vehicle a few years prior. And when I tried it before, to me, it was like being with a learner driver. It was like overly cautious, with just like
very robotic. Yeah, exactly. We call it herky jerky.
Like,
herky jerky.
herky jerky, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas like for the Waymo, it felt to me like I was on a tram, that it was so practiced in the maneuvers that it was doing, even when I had to cross 3 lanes and do a left turn, etc.
Very smooth. Yeah.
Very smooth. And then when I came out, it, reminded me that I had my bags and blah, 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 got out. And the weirdest part for me, honestly, in addition to like seeing this like steering wheel moving around, was that I wasn't prompted to tip. And I was like, oh, I was like, okay, well, this is something. So, and also that, you kind of mentioned some of the downsides of human drivers and around safety. The other feeling that I had was also around, well, the driver's not texting. It's not distracted by these different screens. So me as an individual, I felt more comfortable, even in, we'll call it my second ride in an autonomous vehicle, than I did with a regular driver. So to your point, I think it's interesting that when you get something right, you can change people's attitudes and their perceptions just by really getting the small things right. But Tim, I might shift gears a little bit and maybe just talk about the future. And you've worked in government, you've worked in corporate, you've worked in a whole lot of different spaces, and you also spent a lot of time at university getting your degrees. So when you think about the future of work, what do you think large organizations need to do to adapt to be future ready?
Yeah, it's a really big question, and it's something that I'm literally working on with a few companies right now. There's some issues, right? I take it back to when I worked at the city. I was foisted onto a existing department that was intergenerational. The youngest intern was 19, and the most senior employee was 68. And everything in between. So all 4 generations were basically present. And, I was 32, 33 at the time. I was like, well, okay, I just didn't manage those people. And I realized very quickly, wow, every generation has a different management style. Some want complete autonomy. Just give me the assignment. Don't see them for 3 or 4 days. And they come back with the product. Others want more interaction and brainstorming together. And others need constant reassurance that they're doing the right thing and daily feedback, sometimes daily affirmations, right? So it was this whole interesting thing of understanding the different nuances by generation. And then when we had an opportunity for having work from home, for example, it was interesting how it affected different people very differently. Some, mostly families with young children, loved it, absolutely loved it. More senior people who are on their own or empty nesters hated it because they're so used to being in the office environment. Frankly, it's sadly part of their daily life. And the younger population was mixed. Some really liked it. Some wished that they had more interaction because, they're learning the ropes. They want to get involved. They want to be part of the situation. So all that really, really was a real lesson to me of wow, the future's going to be very different from what we think it is right now. And it's going to be much more hybridized. And a lot of the issues we have, a lot of the articles, the anti-work from home is coming mainly from, sorry to say, the real estate industry, because they've got stranded commercial assets of high rises that people don't want to go to every day, but they've got a few days a week, but not every day. And then the biggest proponents of work from home are basically small startups who are like, well, we're remote central from the day one. We don't really care. And they think about things like, we do in-person collaborative sprints to really get to those moonshot type of questions, because you do need that interaction. You do need to work together and really bounce off everyone's physical state. And then they work hybridly, asynchronously on tasks that are not necessarily like, you don't need to come to the office and commute 1 hour each way to answer emails. You can do that at home, but you should come into the office if we're going to collaborate on a project together that is in that brainstorming phase of strategy, right? And so we're seeing a lot of that being understood by certain leaders. And then we have the laggard leaders who are insisting people all come back to the office. And I just think that's going to change. But especially with, that's the future of the workplace, but the future of work itself, with AI and automation and a lot more tools coming into the place, we're not necessarily going to see AI replace jobs. I think that's a big scare tactic that I don't think is going to play out for the majority of people. There may be some jobs that do get automated and replaced, but they would have been replaced anyway. They're not about AI. It's about automation. So they're very different. But the AI piece, I think, is going to augment people's roles, just like the internet did and just like email did 40 years ago. We didn't lose the jobs. We just were required to do different things. This is the first time, though, where we're not certain whether AI and all the different things in work are going to actually once and for all allow us to work less and have a quality of life that we haven't been used to. Everything else in the past, whether it's email, internet, smartphones, etc., it's just made us do more. We've just produced more and more and more, made us more productive, but our hours have actually gone up and our personal downtime's gone down. And so a lot of people lament this and talk about that the future of work is going to be now an opt-in rather than opt-out. We're going to opt in to be connected rather than opt out of not wanting to be connected, which is the situation we have now, right? So it's going to be, we're always going to be connected, unfortunately or fortunately, and it's going to be up to us to have that discipline. The other thing that's really interesting is that the future of work is all gig work. And I think that's really upsetting a lot of people. We have high paying gigs. We do this now. Middle paying gigs and low paying gigs. And that precarious, that whole precarious work, that precarious nature of it is creating a new class of people that, and it's going to be interesting how that all folds out, because it's only going to become more and more exacerbated.
I think it's so interesting the way that you describe the future of work and the future workplace. And of course, in talking about the future workplace and talking about the impact of different generations and the different values that they have, it is a reality. And understanding that people at different stages of life do want to be able to work in a different way. You've gone from a very traditional role working in, large companies to running your own consultancy. You're currently in Greece visiting family, spending a few months there, and being an Australian who lives in America, going full digital nomad because you and your partner and your beautiful young daughter are able to do this. I think really does exemplify exactly what you are talking about. Now, when it comes to AI, I'm with you on that, and we consider, will AI mean that we end up working more, or will it mean that we end up working less? What I believe is that, yes, the expectation is going to be that people are able to do more in a day because the technology is available. So those that do things the old way, they're going to struggle because the expectation will rise. But those that know how to use the tools that are available they'll be able to do more efficient and to be more efficient and more in line with where things are going. All right. So Tim, rapid fire questions, give short little answers. This is about your habits and your daily practices so that people can get into the mindset of what does it take to be Tim. Are you a morning person or a night owl? When do you do your best work?
My best work is in the morning. I'm not an early morning person and I'm not a late night person. I'm kind of like in the middle, right in the middle there.
Moderate morning. All right. So how do you structure your week?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, a lot of people look at my life and say, wow, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. It's like, and I explained to you the last time we had a chat, Nick, this has taken me 10 years to basically design this overnight success. And so my work week is typically, my baby basically is up every 2 hours. She sleeps 12 hours a night. So we basically mirror her pattern of like, that's great, right? But during the day, she's up 2 hours, asleep for an hour, up for 2 hours. And so my partner and I basically take turns in looking after her. And then in that time we have to ourselves, we go and do exercise. We go to the beach. We go and clear our head. We do like a dose of nature, just go out there in nature to clear our head and clear our thoughts. And then one of us will basically prepare the food for the day. And then we'll basically swap the cleaning duties, etc. But it took a while to get into that pattern, to understand that habit, because we've been planning for a child for a while. And so we kind of got ourselves into this pattern, understanding that this is how babies work. And then when Astra was born, she basically slotted into our life and basically hasn't really changed much. In fact, she's made us more focused. And so this is pretty much our life, in that I've purposely created my own company so I could choose my clients, choose the hours that I work, and really embody, like you said, that future of work and the future of work-life balance. And it isn't this thing of like escaping to get away from it. It's being part of this rhythm and routine every day, so that it doesn't feel like you're missing out on anything and you're getting to do all the things you want to do anyway. It's just in bite-sized packets.
I love that. And I think you don't hear that often enough, that you pre-designed your lifestyle around wanting to have a child. So
yes.
it didn't just happen. You set the framework in place, and I think very much speaking to your philosophy around big projects, a baby is definitely a big project. So
it is the ultimate moonshot.
The ultimate, absolutely. And then, of course, you have a wonderful partner.
Yes.
All right. So when you're stuck,
takes a team. You need a team. That's right.
Takes a team, takes a village. When you're stuck, do you actively seek solutions, or do you give it time and space?
No. So when I'm stuck, what I do is basically step away, walk away, usually ride a bicycle or swim or whatever I can do outside. Because when my mind's in motion, that's when I get the breakthrough. It's if I'm sitting on the problem, it'll just get fester and bigger and bigger. And this is an old saying of like, if you look at the boulder and stare at the boulder, all you see is a boulder. But if you step back, you actually can go around the boulder, right? So that's the thinking I take.
I love that. Which philosophers, theorists, or inventors inspire you?
I'm a typical nerd. I like Nikola Tesla. I think what he came up with is amazing. I also like the ancient Greek philosophers and inventors as well, because I'm a descendant of them, and so I live and breathe that. Civics is in my blood, so I love anything that basically helps and works with the practical side of our daily life in our cities. I think anyone in that space, like Jane Jacobs, etc., I think they've just been great because they ask those hard questions. They ask the big questions. There's also nemesis from those sides as well that also ask the big questions and did the opposite. So I always look at both sides of it to figure out, like, okay, what's the bit that makes the most sense to me, and draw from that what I can and apply to the current situation.
What technology do you use to stay efficient, and are there any AI tools that you're currently testing out?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yes. So I use Gemini a lot, because it's really it's a godsend for helping me put my thoughts together, to summarize things, to help me research. All of these tools that I use, whether it's for my social media, or whether it's for my work, for my writing, or for my research for my clients, they're all really good as research assistants to get me to that 70% level. But I have to do all of the proofreading and nuance and writing with that. So I want to caution people, like, don't use it to create products and services. Use it to get you to the majority of it so that you can put your stamp and your own persona on it, because people pick it up straight away. Like, I can read people's information now and know that it's been written by AI because there's a pattern that comes with it. And I think it's a unique opportunity from my side of like, AI is really good at learning patterns and understanding data from patterns and insights and informing us on those recommendations. But I also understand patterns and data and insights. And so I can see those patterns, and you can too. So I think it's so there's some of those AI tools that are really helpful out there, but they're only so good as to get you to that level of I would say final draft. You have to do the actual work and get it to final and release.
Yeah. And that's the thing. By its nature, Gemini, ChatGPT, they're taking all of the information that's out there and bringing it into a central core, which means that it's generic. And I believe for both of us, we're considered thought leaders, that if we're going to rely on generic, and for everyone out there, if you're going to rely on generic, you'll always be generic. And it's what makes us unique, our own experiences, our own point of view, our, pulling in insight from different aspects of our lives and education. That really is that shine and what we need to have more of in the world. But Tim, it has been such a great delight speaking to you. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights today. If people want to hear more about you and keep in touch with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Nikki. Thank you so much for having me. Sure, just go to timpapandreou.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, LinkedIn, on X, on the socials. I'm all there. I'm everywhere. And please subscribe to my newsletter and take a look at my Forbes articles.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such a delight, and I look forward to continuing our conversation in real life, sometime in Miami or New York or Greece or Australia. Who knows?
Wherever it is. Me too. So good to see you, Nikki. Thanks so much.
A big thank you to Tim Papandreou for joining us on The Visionaries and sharing his insights into the future of technology and innovation. If you're enjoying the show or finding it valuable, please consider rating or reviewing it. It really helps us to spread the word and reach even more listeners. Don't forget to share this episode with friends or colleagues who might benefit from Tim's wisdom on bringing big ideas to life. You can also stay connected with me on LinkedIn or YouTube at Nikki Greenberg. Thanks again for tuning in, and I can't wait to have you join us for the next episode.